Okay, let's dive right into this explainer of a recent publication in the journal Nature that is, quite frankly, completely rewriting what we know about the ancient world. If you think you already know the whole story of the Silk Road, well, you might want to brace yourself, because archaeologists have just pulled back the curtain on a monumental discovery in Central Asia, and it challenges literally centuries of historical assumptions. We usually picture the Silk Road as this grueling, sandy highway connecting China to the West, right? Just a harsh path to be endured. But what if the stops along the way were actually the main event? What if the spaces in between those famous endpoints were entirely misunderstood by us this whole time?
Which brings us to rethinking the Silk Road entirely. Specifically, we're looking at these cities in the clouds and high-altitude urbanism.
See, archaeologists just uncovered two medieval cities in Uzbekistan, Tashbulak and Tugunbulak. And the really wild part? This number right here, 2,200 meters. To put that staggering altitude into perspective, these cities were sitting up to 2,200 meters above sea level. For context, that's roughly comparable to the elevation of Machu Picchu in Peru. Having thriving mountain urbanism at this extreme altitude is incredibly rare, making these cities absolute marvels of ancient engineering and endurance.
And let's just talk about the sheer scale of what was found here. Tashbulak was the smaller of the two, covering about 12 hectares. But then you have Tugunbulak, which absolutely dwarfs it at a massive 120 hectares. These were definitely not tiny, makeshift outposts where tired travelers just pitched a tent for the night. No way. Tugunbulak was one of the largest regional cities of its entire era, a sprawling metropolis sitting literally right up in the clouds.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth did a 120-hectare city hide for over 1,000 years? Well, researchers used drone-based lidar scanning. It's this brilliant remote imaging technology. And according to Professor Michael Fricchetti, the lead archaeologist on the project, the unique erosion dynamics of this specific mountain setting let them capture some of the highest resolution archaeological lidar images ever published. They basically peeled back the earth to reveal the past. And wow, look at what the lidar revealed. A complex, thriving urban landscape completely invisible to the naked eye. We're talking about intricately planned plazas, massive fortifications, well-laid roads, dense habitations, the whole shebang. It's a fully realized city structure just waiting beneath the soil.
This leads us to the people themselves, nomads, iron and steel, and how they found prosperity in the mountains. Because think about it, building a city at this altitude requires a very specific type of people, and a very lucrative reason to stay. Dr. Farhad Maksudov, director of Uzbekistan's National Center of Archaeology, points out that these weren't your typical lowland city dwellers. Actually, they were fiercely independent nomadic pastoralists. They had a material culture completely different from the people down in the lowland oases, and they maintained their own distinct political economy for over 1,000 years. But they weren't just wandering around with herds, They were building permanent, really formidable structures. Preliminary digging at Tugunbulak uncovered this massive fortress protected by rammed earth walls that were a staggering 3 meters thick. I mean, that level of fortification tells us right away they had something extremely valuable to protect. And here is exactly what they were protecting. That fortress wasn't just for defense, it was highly likely a buzzing industrial factory. The locals would mine rich iron ore deposits, smelt the metal right inside these fortress factories, and produce highly valuable steel. It's this combination, animals, ores, and heavy industry, that really drove the immense prosperity of these mountain cities. They were kind of like the steel barons of the ancient world.
So, we arrive at Central Asia, acting as the true heart of the network. This discovery, honestly, it completely flips our understanding of the Silk Road ecosystem. We kind of have to reevaluate the entire geopolitical landscape of medieval Asia. As Dr. Fricchetti perfectly sums it up, the mountains weren't just geographical obstacles to survive. They were host to major centers for interaction. These massive, high-altitude hubs were actively pulling people, resources, and ideas up into the mountains rather than just pushing them through some narrow valley pass. For the longest time, the old view painted Central Asia as merely the middleman, just a series of remote rest stops connecting the real heavyweights in China and the West. But now, this gives us a totally new paradigm. Central Asia was the complex, innovative, beating heart of the network itself. Major political forces were at play right here, driving innovation entirely on their own terms. So, your big takeaway from this explainer is this. The Silk Road's high-altitude cities were massive, independent industrial powerhouses. They definitely weren't just stepping stones. They were the destinations. These majestic mountains in Uzbekistan hid booming metropolises fueled by an incredibly sophisticated economy of animals, steel, and precious resources.
I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. We just found a 120-hectare industrial empire sitting 2,200 meters in the sky, right? And it was completely invisible until we pointed lasers at the ground. So if cities like Tugunbulak were hiding in plain sight this whole time, how many other ancient hubs are still waiting to be discovered up in the clouds? It really makes you look at every mountain range and wonder what secrets are still buried right beneath the surface.